It might be Derby season, but it's time to cap the card for the final day of the spring meet at Keeneland. Salutations and welcome, friends. I'm your host of this episode of Capping the Card. My name is Matthew DeSantis, and you can find me on Twitter at the handle at Failed to Menace. Welcome to this episode of Capping the Card, where we are going to go race 1 through 10 and give you my top pick and top value play for the entire card. The closing day at Keeneland and their spring meet. What a spring meet it's been. We've seen some incredible races, and it's hard to believe that it's already over. And of course, we're transitioning to Churchill Downs now. Before we get into this, make sure to press that subscribe button here on YouTube. Obviously, you've seen we have a slew of Kentucky Derby content for you. But listen, we still do live betting on Thursday nights in the lounge. We still have Capping the Card. We still got Doubling Down. We're still going to be following all the graded stakes action next week. I'm going to have some really special Capping the Cards. We're going to be doing Capping the Card for the the Kentucky Oaks Day, I should say, as well as the Kentucky Derby Day. Maybe if I get my arm twisted a little bit more, we might even do the Thursday of Kentucky Derby, or Thurby, as it's sort of commonly referred to as. So we're going to have a lot of content with you next week in terms of capping these races, analyzing them, giving you some picks, giving you value plays. And like I said, if this is your first time tuning into Capping the Card, the premise is pretty simple. Race 1 through 10, I give you my top pick, I give you my top value play, try to make you a little bit of money through the process. We've been relatively good at that this meet. We've had some really strong ROI days. We've had some days where we struggled a little bit, but like I said, always try to put you in a good place, at least give you some suggestions of other horses to use, maybe as you're building out your horizontal tickets, or horses to include in vertical exotics as well. Well, no time like the present to get started, so let's dive right into this final spring meet day at Keeneland, which is going to be Friday. And one thing to make note of is that it does look like there's rain in the forecast. Going to be rainy on Thursday, rain on Friday. So take that into consideration when you're capping some of these races. I know I certainly did. It's something just to keep in mind, whether you're thinking about the turf conditions, whether you're thinking about dirt conditions, etc. But something certainly, like I said, to keep in mind as you cap these races on Friday. And we'll start off with race 1, which is a $75,000 claiming race. You don't see those many days of the week. It's going 1 mile and a 16th for 3-year-old fillies. And this is one that I think is kind of interesting because you have a really heavy favorite from a morning line standpoint on the outside with Bold and Beautiful, certainly exiting some pretty nice races, has run up against a filly like Punch Bowl 2 back, lost pretty handily to that filly back then. 9-5 in the morning line. I just can't really get around that. So I ultimately went to the second choice, which is Huntley. And I like this filly quite a bit. I actually liked her in some other races when she actually broke her maiden back at Fairgrounds on the Comp Day undercard. Huntley's a really interesting horse in that the last 2 times out, she's run against absolute monsters, run up against Southlawn and run up against Merlaza. Here's the kicker. When she ran up against Southlawn, she was actually favored in that race. So this is a filly that has attracted a lot of attention and a lot of money at the betting windows. She didn't run particularly well that day. She had, I think, a kind of uncomfortable inside trip. I don't think she really loved that setup that she had that day. Next time out, she runs against Merlaza, another really tough customer who obviously we just saw come back win the Valley of the Vapors and Oaklawn this past weekend. So we've seen those races come back pretty live, obviously, that she's exiting 3-1 on the morning line. Here's the other reason I like her. There's a lot of speed in this race. You're going to see Bold and Beautiful very forward. You're going to see Pachanga Loca, the number 6, very forward. You're going to see the number 4, Flamand, very forward. These are horses that are probably going to burn things up a little bit on the front end. Now, the Keeneland dirt has been holding early speed pretty well, but Huntley is a horse that will be forwardly placed. I'd imagine that she'll be tucked in right behind those first 3. We're going to be out in the lead. I think she's in a perfect position to really capitalize. Norm Cassie, I think, is a really good trainer in this sort of a spot. 27% on these sort of class drops from allowance to claiming races. He's teaming up with Tyler. Get this, at the Keeneland meet so far, they're 4 for 6 winning. Now I know that's a small sample size, but 4 out of 6, 67% with a 579 ROI. So I'm going to use Huntley as my top pick in race 1. Now, for my value play in race 1, I'm actually going to go to the inside a little bit. Look at number 2, Need Some Money, because, hey, who doesn't need some money, especially right before the Kentucky Derby? This horse is entered in a race on Thursday, so do keep an eye of whether or not she is scratched from this particular race. But if she sticks around, I think she really makes a little bit of sense, particularly underneath in vertical exotics. She's going to come running late. She has nice late pace speed figures, and as I mentioned, there's going to be plenty of speed up front in this race. She gets back to Sarah Hamilton's barn. That's actually where she started her career and got both of her victories in Hamilton's barn before going to Aaron Shorter's barn the last 3 times out. That horse really kind of, they stepped this horse up in class maybe a little too much. I think now going back down to the claiming level is around where she's probably best suited. This race certainly did a couple up, maybe a little bit saltier than they were expecting, but I do like this in terms of a class drop at a long horse that's going to give you a nice price in terms of 10-1 on the morning line with Rafael Barriano aboard. I'm going to use this horse as an underneath play only, probably underneath Huntley with maybe a couple of others. Tatuba is another horse that's kind of interesting for Todd Pletcher, another horse that I think should sit a similar trip to Huntley. But I'm going to use, like I said, Need Some Money for a big price underneath in race number 1. Well, let's go to race number 2, which is one of those favorite, everybody loves them, right? The 5.5 furlong sprints for the 2-year-olds. And this one is on the turf, and it's an $80,000 maiden special weight. And you'll notice that there is a name that is noticeably absent from this top pick and value play, and that is the name of Wesley Ward. He's got 2 fillies entered in this race, but I just don't love their post positions. One of them is going to be on the far inside. Bunchen, and this is a horse that is 9-5 on the morning line, is the favorite in this race. But here's the thing, the rail has been absolutely dead at Keeneland on the turf. You've just not seen any winners coming out of there. I really dislike 2-year-olds being placed on the inside rail. That's just such a tough trip for them. And it's typically, I love actually playing the angle of the next time out when they move from the rail to the outside. That's usually an automatic play for me because a lot of times they just get into trouble on the inside, especially if they're not able to get to the lead. Certainly Ward's horses always break really well, but it still is a little bit concerning, enough so that I'll try to get past this one. His other horse is actually Chitara, and she's actually also eligible. And honestly, a lot of horses are going to have to scratch out of this race for her to draw in. As a result, I went to the number 2 horse, Beyond Oscar, second choice in the board for Jonathan Thomas. Listen, Jonathan Thomas may not have won yet at this Keeneland meet, but out of 6 entries, he's finished second 4 times. That shows me that he's getting his horses ready. No, they haven't broken through yet, but it's not as if these horses are not well prepared, not well meant, not well positioned to be successful during this meet. So I like Thomas in this sort of a spot. I always liked him as a trainer. Then you have Louis Saez aboard, always a jockey that I like in this sort of a spot. This horse has had improving works each time out. 3 furlong work last time out, going 36-3. And there's plenty to suggest that this is a very precocious horse. 2 first out winners from the dam Beyond the Waves. So you like to see this. This is also a half to the horse Bricks and Mortar. Very, very good horse. Thomas also 21% with 2-year-olds. So a lot of things align here. You have a precocious dam, or a dam who has precocious offspring. You have really nice pedigree with a half to Bricks and Mortar. You have a trainer who's been getting horses ready, but just not quite broken through yet here at the Keeneland meet. And on top of that, he's very good at 2-year-olds. Package all those things together. I like Beyond Oscar at 3-1. And you know you're going to get that price because people are going to bet that Wesley Ward horse. Now, for my value play, I was really kind of tossing between 2 horses, the number 4, Donate Life, and the number 5, Liam's Message. Ultimately, I went with the number 4, Donate Life, and I think you might actually end up getting a better price on this horse. Liam's Message is actually 8-1 on the morning line, but here's the thing. That's an Irad Ortiz Jr. horse. Now, Irad is a great jockey, but he's had a little bit of a rough Keeneland meet. He's not been winning at the highest percentage, only 15% this meet, and he's been going on a pretty long drought after a hot start. So, I'm not thrilled going in that direction. And here's the thing: he's going to get bet down. He's going to really get bet down from 8-1. I think Donate Life might actually float up a little bit because you don't have as strong of connections with Phil Schoenthal, good trainer, but maybe not, doesn't have maybe the name recognition that Fausto Gutierrez does, the trainer of Liam's Map. So let's focus on Donate Life, though. Look at the last three works of this horse: 49-2, 4 furlong, 48-1 gate work, 4 furlong, and then a bullet, 48-4, 4 furlong work. The fact that this horse is turning in a bullet 4 furlong work at the age of 2 is pretty incredible. This is a Munnings baby. You got to like that. I know the trainer is not spectacular with 2-year-olds and first time outs. He's had very limited success in that space. But that said, this horse is going to flash a ton of speed, and a 5.5 furlong sprint on the turf. Honestly, if you get to the lead first, I'll take the speed of the speed. I think Donate Life might just represent that. Ray Luke Gutierrez, he's going to be aggressive coming out of the gate. I'll take this horse at 6-1 on the morning line. Well, let's move to race number 3, which is a $20,000 maiden claimer going a mile and a 16th on the dirt. And this is for 3-year-old and up for fillies and mares. And I'm not purposely continuing to pick horses that are 3-1 on the morning line as my top pick, but that's kind of the way it's worked out. And again, I'm fading the favorite here. So there's another horse in this race, DDB, who is a 2-1 favorite for Wesley Ward. Here's the thing: that horse is transitioning from the synthetic at Turfway Park to the dirt at Keeneland. Ward is actually not that successful with that sort of a move a lot of times. We've seen other trainers be successful with that, but it's not been necessarily a winning move for Ward, particularly at Keeneland. Also, that's a horse that finished 7th in debut. Yes, there's a little bit of a class drop going from a maiden claiming 50 to a maiden claiming 20. So you're expecting a little bit of a class drop, but still finishing 7th in debut, going a mile, now stretching out to a mile and a 16th. Not so sure about that. I'm going to go with viewers' discretion. Number 4 horse for Keeneland Gorder, I should say, with Gerardo Corrales aboard. Second back from a really long layoff, went from October 24th to March 30th. So you saw that kind of 6-7 month layoff there. And dropped in class, is going to be dropping in class slightly, was running at a maiden claiming 30, finished 3rd that day. Here's the thing: this is a horse that is 6 for 7 in the money in her career. 2 seconds and 4 thirds. Always seems to be a very hard trying horse, whether she is in maiden special weight company or maiden claiming company. She's run on the turf, she's run on the dirt, she's run on the synthetic. Now, her one dirt effort was not great, but that was also a race that was intended to be on the turf that was taken off. That said, the dirt works appear to be fine, and her pedigree would suggest that dirt is not a problem. I mean, Outwork as a sire is maybe not spectacular, but doesn't really show any preference dirt over turf. And Minestrone, the dam, is actually a halfway decent dam when it comes to producing dirt winners, most times at the sprint level. But still, you've seen it's not as if they're allergic to running on the dirt. So I think all those things mixed together, this horse is pretty versatile, can sit a lot of different trips, can sit far back and make a run late, can sit pretty forward, as she did 2 back at Indiana. So it's just some things to think about. Has run up against a lot of next out winners as well. So I'm going to go with viewers' discretion at 3-1 on the morning line. Now, for my value play, this is a horse I absolutely love. And the only reason she's my value play is because she is cross-entered in a race at Gulfstream Park on Friday. Or on Thursday, I should say. So make sure to take a look at whether or not she is running in that race. But I absolutely love Replenish. 8-1 on the morning line for Saffie Joseph Jr. Now, listen, I could tell you that Saffie is terrible in the state of, I should say the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and he is. But if you get him out of stakes races, he's not quite as bad in those types of spots. You got Irad Ortiz Jr. aboard. But here's the crazy part. This is a horse that is coming out of Jeremiah O'Dwyer's barn, coming to Saffie Joseph Jr. This is a horse that had been running on the turf and the synthetic and is now going to the dirt. Listen to this. When Saffie gets a horse into his barn and they do a surface switch from turf to dirt, he's winning at a 46% rate. This is where Safi, I feel, is a very underrated trainer, in my opinion. A lot of times when you see horses go to his barn, he does one of two things. He either switches surfaces or he switches distances. He stretches horses out, he shortens horses up, or he moves them to a different surface. He's very, very good at that too. And so, obviously, winning 46% off a trainer change, turf to dirt, very impressive. This is a horse that was relatively well meant at one point, actually was entered into a stakes race up at Woodbine last year. So this is a horse that, like I said, was well meant at one point and just has maybe not been on quite on the right surface. And I think getting this horse to Safi 8-1 on the morning line, you get Irad aboard. I know Irad's been a little bit rusty, but if you give me 8-1 on him and a horse that is likely going to be around 8-1, I think on the morning line, by post time, I should say, I'll take a shot with number 7 Replenish as my value play in race number 3. Well, let's move to race number 4, which is a $50,000 claiming race going a mile and a 16th on the dirt. And this race is for 3-year-olds and up. And this is another one. Guess what, folks? We're going to go with a 3-1 top pick choice again. And again, we are actually not going with the favorite in this particular race. Yet again, the favorite in this spot is actually the number 2 horse, Malibu Mike, at 9-5. This is a horse I think Malibu Mike's just better on the synthetic, to be honest with you. And I'm going to take a shot with Ardenwood, coming off a little bit of a layoff, but should get the speed and is really going to be the lone speed in this race. This is all about pace makes the race, I think, because there's almost no pace in this one. I think you can look maybe at the number 7 horse Freeze Pop, who I kind of contemplated using as my top pick, actually. But I'm ultimately going to go with Ardenwood at 3-1. I just think this horse can sit the right type of trip, has shown the ability to run very, very well when sitting in that kind of stalking position or on the lead. Really, this horse gets into trouble when it goes too far back. That's not going to be the problem here. Listen, I know you're working with some ice cold connections. Jareth Loveberry 0 for 23 at Keeneland so far. McLean Robertson 0 for 3 at Keeneland. Obviously not a huge sample size. Horses coming off a layoff. But here's the thing. Robertson's actually pretty good in that sort of a spot. 19% win rate with 180-day plus layoff. The works look spectacular. You look at a 1:01 bullet at Keeneland, was first of 14 that day, comes back on April 21st, fires a minute flat, 5 furlong work, third of 25. So this horse seems to be ready and geared up and ready to go, has been training pretty consistently over the last month. So I'm going to take a shot with Ardenwood. Like I said, it's a little bit of a pace play. I think this horse just gets to the lead and is able to wire the field. As I mentioned, the dirt has been carrying early speed very well at Keeneland. So for my value play, I'm going to go to a horse I really like a lot. I've actually liked this horse a little bit before, which is the number 4 horse, Odds On Tony, at 10-1 on the morning line. This horse ran in a really tough spot the last time it stretched out. Ran up against Cagliostro, who, of course, we saw almost win that big allowance race with Dennington at Fairgrounds and then come back and run in the Louisiana Derby. So this was a horse that was absolutely running against some pretty big-time company last time out. The horse, after that race, goes to the turf, actually, runs not a particularly great race, then bounces back to the dirt, breaks his maiden in a maiden 50, and then steps up to an starter allowance 50 last time out at Keeneland, finishes 5th. I didn't think it was the worst effort. It was a 9-horse field. Horse was stuck on the inside rail. Now you're getting off that inside rail. This is a horse for Ken McPeak with Louis Saez aboard. I just think this horse has a little something to show. I think this horse stretching back out makes a lot of sense. If you look at this horse in maiden debut sprinting, this horse went from 11 lengths back to 2 lengths back. This horse can make up some serious ground late. Now, I know what I just said, that there's not a ton of pace in this race, but it's a smaller field, and I would expect that Odds On Tony will be a little bit closer to the rest of the pack than being strung out 11 lengths back. So I imagine this horse is probably going to sit a trip very similar to the one he sat in his maiden victory, where he's sitting maybe 2, 3, 4 lengths off and then can use that late kick. I actually like this horse quite a bit. I think this horse will be able to come closing pretty strong late, and I would expect a 10-1 in the morning line. You're getting a little bit of value here. I'd use this horse underneath if I want to use maybe a 3-4 exacta box or something along those lines in this particular race. Like this horse a lot for the value that you're getting. Well, let's go to race number 5, which is a $100,000 allowance race. And This starts the point where it gets really tough to get past the favorite. And I should have mentioned that at the beginning, that this card feels like almost two separate cards. It feels like the first few races you can get past the favorite. Maybe you're going to the second choice, maybe the third choice in some instances. But you can get past the favorite, I think, in a lot of these first four races. You start getting to race 5, yikes. It gets really chalky, I feel like, the rest of the sequence. Now, it doesn't mean I think there's huge prices to be had underneath, and I'm excited to talk about those. But this kind of starts a sequence where you're like, it's kind of tough to get around the favorite. And while the favorites might not be invincible, looking at the rest of these fields, it doesn't give you a ton of confidence in some of the horses they're running against. And so we start with this race, race 5, with, of course, We the People, who was a horse that was obviously in the Belmont Stakes last year, won the Peter Pan up at Belmont, finished second in the West Virginia Derby. Now, I mentioned that Peter Pan and I mentioned that West Virginia Derby for a reason. Both those days were on sealed tracks. I mentioned there's going to be a ton of rain in Lexington Thursday and Friday. There is a chance that it is going to be a sealed track. At the very least, it is going to be a track with moisture in it. That bodes well for We the People, who clearly likes a little bit of moisture in the track. If it was a dry, fast track, maybe I'd try to get past this favorite, but it's just really hard for me to do that. Here's the thing. This is also a horse that changed barns, went from Rudy Brissett to Todd Pletcher. Pletcher is actually 24% off a long layoff where there's a trainer switch. Like I said, you add that with the fact this horse likes likes these sorts of conditions, and should sit a pretty comfortable trip. I mean, should be able to get onto the lead without much trouble. I do like Hero Status as a horse to use in an exacta underneath. I'm going to try to kind of get past Business Model as a horse. I know that, horse has been pretty consistent. It's got a couple of nice races to run back to for Brendan Walsh, who certainly that barn has been very solid. And I have a couple of his horses, I think, later in the card. But I do like Hero Status quite a bit here at 9-2 in the morning line for Robertino Diodoro as a value play. Look at that race 2 back, that Razorback handicap that he was in. Everybody came back to win next time out, except for Hero Status, unfortunately. But, Last Samurai, West Willpower, Law Professor, all came back to run really well next time out. That was a pretty key race. And even Hero Status came back to run 4th in the Oaklawn Mile. So this is a horse exiting 2 straight Grade 3 companies. Diodoro is actually 22% on the dirt at Keeneland. This is a horse that just feels like he's going to finish underneath 6 for 10 in his career in the exacta. So I like using this horse, like I said, underneath at 9-2 of a big price. At, obviously, We the People at 4-5. He's going to be, like I said, a short price up top. But I just think the track conditions and I think the way this race shapes up with not a lot of other early speed is going to really play up nicely for We the People in his return to the track after obviously a very lengthy layoff last seen in the Pennsylvania Derby. But obviously going from Grade 1 company to N3X company is a little bit of a change, obviously, for him. Well, let's move to race number 6, and this is a $100,000 main special weight on the turf for 3-year-olds and up. And listen, I told you it was going to get a little chalky here, but I do feel like this is a race where you can get a little bit of a price. I really like the number 9 horse here, Pure Country for Victoria Oliver. This horse is coming second back from a layoff, and I just think is well meant for this particular race. Actually improves speed figures from that long layoff, which I always like to see because it means that there might be yet another gear that this horse has yet to hit. Here's the other thing. The number 8 horse in this race, another Brendan Walsh horse. I feel like I'm fading all these Brendan Walsh horses. The guy's winning at a 27% clip at Keeneland. But here's the thing. The number 8 horse is the morning line favorite at 5-2. The number 9 horse, Pure Country, is coming out of the exact same race that the number 8 horse is coming out of. Salabia. So Salabia is coming out of the same race as Pure Country. Pure Country finished a length behind her in that race. Now you're getting 5-2 in the number 8 horse, but you're getting 6-1 on Pure Country. I'd much rather use Pure Country. Showed that these two horses are pretty darn close to being comparable last time out, and second back from the layoff. I like that angle. Victoria Oliver is actually 25% second back from a layoff after a long layoff like this one, is actually winning at a 19% clip in maiden special weight races. Meanwhile, Walsh is actually 0 for 5, second back from a long layoff in maiden special weights. That's a small sample size, admittedly, but I just thought that was kind of interesting to see. So I like the fact that Pure Country, I think, is going to sit a pretty handy trip from that number 9 post. I think this is a horse that has tactical speed, can cross and clear a lot of horses, and sit in a decent stalking, maybe even forwardly mid-pack sort of a trip. Has come out of some races, faced a lot of next out winners. Like to see this form, and I'm just going to use this horse that I think you're going to get a little bit of a price on here in this race number 6. Now, the price play that I'm going to give you in the value play I like is the number 10 horse, Seldom Seen, for the aforementioned Jonathan Thomas, who I mentioned is really, like I said, getting horses well intended and getting horses ready for this sort of a trip. So getting the blinkers put on, and here's the kicker. Thomas is 31% winning maiden special weight second starts over the last 5 years on the turf. So obviously very, very successful trainer, getting them ready second time out, maiden special weight on the turf. You add all those things together, and in addition to the blinkers being a pretty successful move for him, I like this a lot. This is a horse that should be a little bit more forwardly placed now, and I think, we'll be able to use that speed coming out of the starting gate to be well positioned. This horse also, I think, has the pedigree to suggest that it's going to go from synthetic last time out of Gulfstream to turf this time out of Keeneland. If you look underneath, this is a horse that is a half to a stakes placed turf horse named Starting Over. So there is some turf in the pedigree, obviously sired by Arrogate up top. Always love to see those Arrogate babies. And so I think this is a horse that has some potential at an 8-1 morning line price. I'm willing to absolutely use this horse underneath in a lot of my plays, but I think it's a good value play in race number 6. Well, let's go to race number 7. And this is one where we really start the chalk train towards the end of this card, where it's tough to get past some really heavy favorites. And we're going to start here with number 3, Castle Warden. And this is a 7 furlong race on the dirt for 3-year-olds. This is a Brad Cox horse who ran, I thought, pretty well last time out. Actually was closing, I thought, relatively well, going 6 furlongs. Was disqualified, was kind of lugged out a little bit that particular day, but was the overwhelming betting favorite, went off as 3-5 favorite. Like I said, was making up ground late and just didn't quite get there, was placed third next to Billy Jack that day. But here's the thing. Cox is 40% in maiden special weight races, second starts at Keeneland over the last 5 years. That's absolutely incredible. This horse has tremendous works. This horse has a great pedigree with Into Mischief up top and Calm Water underneath. Florent Giroux aboard. I think this horse takes the right step forward next time out. Posted a really impressive speed figure, 77 buyer speed figure first time out as well. Hard for me to get past this one in this particular race. The number 5, Bad Boy Frank, at 4-1 on the morning line, probably would be the alternative if you're looking for somebody up top. I just don't know how this horse is going to stretch out from 5.5 furlongs to 7 furlongs. I'm not positive about that. I just maybe don't hold that last race quite as in high regard as I do the race with Castle Warden in coming out of that fairgrounds race, as opposed to Bad Boy Frank coming out of Gulfstream Park. So that's kind of I think, an interesting perspective to have there. And then for my value play, I'm going to give you a bomb. Listen, if I'm going to give you a chalk up top, the least I can do is give you a huge price underneath. And so that is the number 9, Mo Hope, at 20-1 on the morning line. I think there's a lot to like here with this horse. This horse was actually in that race that I mentioned earlier with Cagliostro that Odds On Tony was in. Now, remember, Odds On Tony comes back to win next time on the dirt. Cagliostro goes on to nearly win a high-level allowance race before going on to the Louisiana Derby. So that's a big-time race, and this is a horse that's done nothing but finish second in its first 2 career efforts. Now, the speed figures aren't overwhelming, but here's one thing I did notice. Cagliostro took a massive step from that maiden victory to their next effort. I have a feeling that race maybe came back artificially slow a little bit, and I'm wondering if all these horses are kind of slowly starting to get a little bit better next time out. This is a horse that obviously also should like the continued stretch out. This is a horse that can make up ground, can pass other horses, can sit a few different types of trips. In maiden debut going 6 furlongs, actually sat way back and then made a charge. Stretched out, what happened? This horse was actually sitting in a stalking position. So you get Corey Lannery aboard, who's been aboard the first 2 times. Second time on the Lasix. This horse has been working out really great. I love the April 15th 59-1 5 furlong bullet. I think this horse is ready to go. I'm looking for a big thing from this horse at a huge price of 20-1. I think this horse is going to be great. I think 7 furlongs is perfect because you're cutting back from that mile on the 16th, but it's a little bit longer than the 6 furlongs in debut. I like it. Think it's going to hit him right between the eyes. 20-1. Mo Hope. Let's hope we can cash some tickets with that one, at least up top or underneath. Well, let's go to the graded stakes race on the card, which is the Grade III Bewitch. And this is for a mile and a half on the turf for 4-year-olds and up for the fillies and mares. And this constitutes the return of Warlike Goddess for Bill Mott. And obviously, hard to really fade Warlike Goddess here. And part of it is because this is a mare, 6-year-old mare, who just, she runs so well coming off layoffs. When you see her past performances coming back from the layoffs, she's always run well. You go back August 21st or August 7th of 2021, coming off a layoff, wins the Grade II Glens Falls. You look at the Breeders' Cup filly and mare turf, coming off a long layoff, finishes third by half a length that day. I think that horse was moved way too early, but that's another discussion. Then does the exact same thing here, goes from the Breeders' Cup and lays off until the Bewitch. What does she do? She wins that race by a length and 3/4. Then has another layoff, comes back, wins the Glens Falls. This horse, again, can fire off the layoff. I think Bill Mott knows exactly what he's got with her. Joel Rosario, listen, I was not thrilled with the ride that he gave her in the Flower Bowl that day where she lost by a neck to Virginia Joy. But the reality is, came right back and I thought gave her a great ride in the Breeders' Cup turf against the boys, finishing third to Rebels Romance, obviously a spectacular horse. And, you know, like I said, now is coming back against fillies and mares rather than facing open company. I think she's got a real shot here to just easily win this race. 3-5 in the morning line. I know it's a very short price. Maybe you just are allergic to playing that type of a horse. I get it. I think if you're playing horizontals, this is your single in this sequence. Maybe there's a couple of singles. You could probably put together some pretty skinny tickets in this pick 5 sequence to make a little bit of money, perhaps, and turn a 3-5 into something a little bit more profitable. But hard for me to get past her. Part of it is I just don't love some of the other horses in this race. Personal Best is a horse I kind of like, but I also wasn't able to get the job done against Amazing Grace last time out in the Orchid. So I'm not quite sure I want to go there with Personal Best, especially only at 3-1. This is, not necessarily the best price that you're going to get there. I was intrigued by the number 6 horse, which is an Italian horse coming over for the first time in North America for Graham Motion. But here's the thing: as much as I love Graham, he's over his last 17 with horses making debut in North America. So as a result, my value play is not a huge value, but we're finally going to give Brendan Walsh a little bit of love here for having a great trip and having a great spring meet, I should say, at Keeneland. And I'm going to use Temple City Terror. I'm probably just going to do a straight 4-2 exacta in this race and hammer it home. I really like Temple City Terror. This is a horse that just feels very honest to me, always runs her race. 12 for 30 in the exacta lifetime with 7 victories. I think this is a horse at this distance is actually 3 for 5 winning, 4 for 5 in the money, or a 4 for 5 in the exacta, 5 for 5 in the money, and has actually gotten a win over this Keeneland turf before as well. So there's a lot of things I like. This is also a horse, you look back through those past performances, this horse overwhelmingly runs very consistent speed figures. Really like that. This horse can sit, I think, a very versatile trip, can sit close, can sit a little further back, can close, etc. So depending on how the race plays out, Temple City Terror can do a lot of things. Here's the other part: coming in second back from a layoff. I think that's the other key. Last time out in the Hillsborough, finished 4th that day to Shanta Star, a Scottish Star, who I really liked that day. But that was one where I just felt like that was a leg stretcher more than anything else. This feels like a little bit more of the purpose of this horse coming back. So Jose Ortiz aboard. I'm going to use Temple City Terror underneath Warlike Goddess in the Grade III Bewitch. Well, let's go to the 9th race on the card, which is a $110 allowance for $110,000, not $110. They wouldn't race many races for $110. $110,000 allowance race going 7 furlongs for 4-year-olds and up. And again, it's one where it's hard to get past chalk. And so let me talk through this one a little bit with you, because the number 1 a la carte is on the inside rail. Going 7 furlongs, I'm not as worried about that just because of the way the shoot is at Keeneland, etc. This is a horse that has shown two spectacular speed figures first two times out. Ran a 96, followed up by a 91, going 6 furlongs. This horse has great speed, can easily escape the inside rail. This horse also is not going to face, I think, a ton of pressure. I think Triple Elvis in the number 3 hole is going to put a little bit of pressure on. But I think with the way that this horse is set up inside, this horse is going to gun it. And I don't think that's a problem. Like I said, the early speed has been holding up very well. Here's the other thing. There's just not much else in this race. I wanted to like the number 2 horse Debate a little bit, but that horse is coming back from a pretty significant layoff as well. And here's the thing. Trainer Thomas Drury for Debate is 0 for 6 in allowance races off the layoff at Keeneland. It's concerning that he's not, won there yet. I do think that's a good horse, but the speed figures just don't really match up. So I'm a little worried about that. Overbore for Wesley Ward. This is a horse. I don't know if this horse wants 7 furlongs. This horse has only run over 6.5 furlongs once, and that was on the turf. This horse largely has been running at 5.5, 5 furlongs, 6 furlongs. I just don't know this horse wants 7 furlongs. So now also coming back from a really long layoff, hasn't run since August 24th. So I know Ward is really good off the layoff, but I just don't like this horse off the layoff and stretching out. I just don't like that combination at all. Then you look at Bourbon Heist. And folks, this is where we just get into some trouble because Bourbon Heist would be a great alternative, I feel like, in a lot of ways. The problem is Bourbon Heist does not like to win races. 1 for 15 lifetime. But here's what Bourbon Heist always does. Finishes second. Bourbon Heist, amazingly, 8 for 15, finishing second. 9 for 15 in the exacta. That is absolutely incredible that this horse just hangs and does not want to win. 7 furlongs, I think, is a perfectly fine distance. Is 2 for 3 in the exacta at this distance. Is 1 for 1 in the exacta at Keeneland. You get the bug aboard with UL Novice, getting a 10-pound weight allowance. So, certainly that might be something that you're interested in looking at. It's also a horse that has come back since a long layoff from August to December. Has been running at Turfway Park. And here's what I like. There's been a progression of the speed figures. 79, 83, 87. This horse has been improving every single time out. I think this horse, obviously a little bit of a jump here to this next time, but lost to a horse last time out, Mischievous Rogue, who actually made a very similar jump, went up to a big-time allowance company. Now, did it on the turf, but actually won that race. So that gives me a little bit of hope that's coming out of a pretty live race. I just think this is a horse that's it's a very good horse. It took forever to break his maiden, obviously. Took 13 races to break his maiden. I'm thinking that this horse is going to like the 7 furlongs. Obviously, at a Practical Joke, that's a sire that's been getting a lot of publicity because of Practical Move on the Derby Trail. But I'm going to use Bourbon Heist underneath. I'll probably just, again, go straight 1-6 exacta here. I just, like I said, tried to find an alternative to a la carte, and it was just really tough for me to get there. Let's close out the day with the 10th race on the card. Let's close out the Keeneland Spring Meet, and let's talk about this $110,000 allowance for 3-year-olds on the turf going a mile. And this is one where, folks, I'm going to go to the Chad Brown horse. 2-1 on the morning line, Turf King. I know you're not getting a big price, but I mean, when you look at the PPs, this one is really hard to ignore. Obviously, big speed figure, first time out, coming off a little bit of a layoff, only about a 2-month layoff. But here's the thing. Take a look at that race on February 16th. That race proceeded to produce 4 next out winners in that race, including 3 that went from the synthetic to the turf. Also, Brown is an astonishing 50% when moving from maidens to allowances in their second start on turf off of a layoff. I mean, I know that seems like an obscure fact, but here's the thing. There's 22 instances of that over the last 5 years. He's won 11 of those times. So this is a move that he is very good at, getting these horses ready off a layoff, moving them onto turf, second start, taking a step up in class. This is a horse that's beautifully bred, obviously. Kingsman up top, out of an acclamation mare. There's a lot to like there. And so this is a horse I just really can't get around up top. I just think this horse has got the right trip. Also was able to win that maiden race, we should point out, from the inside rail. Granted, going 2 turns, so that's not as much of a disadvantage, but always impressive when you see a horse win from the inside rail in their first debut. Now, like I said, when I give you a chalk up top, I'm going to try to at least give you a little bit of a price to use underneath. And I'm going to use the horse Midnight Rising, who is actually a Triple Crown nominated horse for Jordan Blair. It's got Luan Machado aboard. This is a horse that won its debut, maiden special weight, then steps up and runs in a stakes race at Turfway Park going a mile and a 16th on the synthetic, finishes fourth that day, but only by actually by a length and a quarter, and had actually taken the lead coming down the stretch. Now, this horse broke its maiden at a mile. And then, like I said, when it stretched out to a mile and 16th, lost a little bit of ground late after gaining the lead. I have a feeling this horse just likes a mile. We talk a lot about this. Some horses just like a mile. And I have a feeling this might be one of those horses. It's a horse that has some decent pedigree underneath. The dam is actually 5 for 9 in the exacta for turf routing in terms of her offspring. I think the mile is a perfect distance. This is a horse that I think just made a move last time, should have won. And I think this horse, 10-1 on the morning line for a horse that clearly had some expectations being Triple Crown nominated, makes a lot of sense. What I will say is if you're looking to try to beat Turf King up top, the horse I would probably tell you to use is number 7, Dunedin. I think that's an interesting horse that's coming out of some nice races, raced in the Grade III Futurity last year, where Nagarok beat him, I should say, and then just recently ran coming back in the Cutler Bay with Behind Enemy Lines and Anglophile beating him that day with Louis Saez aboard, second back from a layoff, 5-1 on the morning line. I think Dunedin is kind of your natural alternative to Turf King. Hard for me to get past that one, but I do like I said, Midnight Rising at a little bit of a price. Well, that's going to do it for me on the capping the card for the final day of the Keeneland Spring Meet. I wish you all the best, obviously, and make sure to press that subscribe button. Make sure to like this video and comment below with who's your best bet of the day for the final day at Keeneland. Well, until next time, friends, my name is Matthew DeSantis. You can find me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace, and I'm here to wish you a profitable day at the races and remind you that it's now post time.